Hi and welcome everybody. We're live here with Sean Hogan, dressed suitably out at headquarters here in Champions Gate, Orlando, Florida. Sean, it's a pleasure to have you and making time to be able to talk today about productive practice in this session. For the listeners and the viewers there, a little bit about me and about Sean. My name is Stuart Clayton. I'm head of education for the Ledbetter Golf Organisation. I'm based just outside of St Andrews in Scotland. I work remotely and help David educate the team, work closely with Sean with the education of all of our instructors, and have been lucky to be around David's Academy network for 20 years now, but not as long as this gentleman on the other side of the screen. Sean Hogan is our worldwide Director of Instruction. He's one of only 7 master certified instructors, has a hugely credible reputation as an instructor, and started his life out in Ireland, became a good player, played on the Irish national team, went to America to the University of South Florida, just in Tampa there in 1988, and then started back with Ledbetter Golf Academies in '94. Sean, can you believe that? 94, I heard it was.
Well, I don't know whether, Stuart, to thank you or whether you're dating me there quite a bit, but no, no, it's a pleasure and connecting with you. Anytime we have our chats on Monday at 7 a.m., it just sort of draws me back to thinking about Scotland. I played for Ireland in the boys' championships, home internationals at Kilmarnock Brassey many years ago. In fact, I think it was Padraig's first cap for Ireland as a junior, so that was nice. And I think he chipped in twice on his win against an English player, so you could sort of see there was greatness there. But no, I appreciate your applauding some of the stuff I've done, and really, it's for us as a company, as you know, Stuart. It starts from the top down. David has been such an inspiration to us all. My first lesson was at Lake Nona, I think in the late 80s, with some of my teammates from the University of South Florida. And lo and behold, David and Nick Faldo walked into the main studio where we're having our swings analyzed. So, you know, having Nick Faldo there and seeing David just was really, for me, the ignition to my teaching career. Very fortunate to have been associated with the team now since the mid-90s, and really, I would say it's been a great journey because I've gotten to teach there, Stuart, all over the world. Golf is such a global sport. I really enjoy going back to Ireland to play with friends, family, clients, and when I got the opportunity to teach for David, I got to teach in Austria, Spain, Portugal. It was just a really enjoyable experience meeting the colleagues and associates we had out there. And it's been a great journey, and hopefully we'll get through this COVID-19. And I was we're actually at the Academy in Osceola County. We're sort of recommended that we wear these, but I'm inside our building, as you can see here, and I'm the only one. And I promise our Academy manager I will wipe down everything I've touched. Nicola, thank you. But yeah, I had a lesson today with a client from South Florida. And by the way, just a shout out, he is actually originally from the Northeast. So to all our students, and certainly my students up in the Northeast, we are thinking of you, our blessings. I know it was Passover and obviously Easter Sunday this week, and hopefully, you know, the light will shine down on us soon, and we'll be able to get back to enjoying everybody and everything that we've been enjoying. So it's, as I say, great to be on, and well wishes to everybody.
Yeah, no, I'd just like to echo that. You know, hopefully everybody's staying safe, staying well, and we wish everybody all the best. And as you say, hopefully this passes soon. But Sean, today we talked a little bit about a week ago about a topic for us to chat about, and more importantly, something that you felt, you know, passionately about, and that's productive practice. And we know that the listeners and the viewers today will be a mixture of golfers and coaches and parents. So we'll try and make sure that the conversation touches upon some tools and some tips for everybody. So hopefully at the end of it, guys, you can get a couple of nuggets out of this that you can implement straight into your golf. And For you, Sean, you deal with a vast array of students, right from kind of, as you term them, the weekend warriors, all the way up to, tour professionals. You deal with a lot of collegiate players. What does productive practice mean to you as an instructor?
Well, as you mentioned, we work with all ages, all abilities here, Stuart, and so as teachers, we've got to keep in mind the client we're working with and the time and available they have to practice and play and their talent level and goals. And so I would say in my younger days as a teacher, I was probably more into, say, just fixing things, fixing faults and not really assessing maybe the player or the student that I was working with. And I think it's very, productive practice essentially for me is all about the student addressing and assessing their weaknesses, focusing, strengthening those weaknesses, and ultimately turning it into improved performance on the golf course. But getting back to it from a teacher's perspective, I would say over the years, and certainly of late, one of our initiatives within the company is to shall we say, watch our students play a lot more and spend time with them on the golf course and get to know them as the player first. And really, even if it's a tour level client, one of the things I ask my tour players when I'm initially meeting them, maybe I've watched them play in a tournament, is, hey, what's your fear? What's your biggest fears? It may be a big miss that the player has, a big block, a big hook, and the same trickles down to, say, the weekend player. What do you struggle with on the golf course? So a big part of the platform of better and more productive practice there, Stuart, starts with an honest assessment for the player, or truly honest assessment. Our tour players, as we've said, have the luxury of ShotLink collecting all this data for us as instructors, so we can sit down with them, and as we have done. I know each year I've worked with Frederick Jakobsen when he's been over here playing on the PGA Tour. We have sort of a boot camp at the end of the year, at the end of the off season and before the start of the new season. We assess. I write down things like his feelings, what he felt he was doing. We try to measure and clarify things, because we have to be careful as players. We come in off the golf course and we may be frustrated. We say, I didn't play well today. Well, define we didn't play well. It might have been course strategy that let you down. There may be some issues in the bag as far as your club gapping or the fit. So it could be a number of things that led to a poor performance. So in terms of productive practice, it's all about, it all starts going a few steps back there, Stuart, having an assessment of your game. I mean, for all the listeners who are recreational players, I would say one of the best things to do in the springtime is, hey, have a playing lesson with your local professional. Obviously a good professional, they're going to listen, they're going to watch. Just go out and play 9 holes and, sort of have a look. The pro will be able to assess, hey, everything from your pre-shot routine. He or she will look in the bag and see what your lineup of equipment is, the makeup of it. They look at even things like your grips to make sure the grip is nice, and to see the state fit, all this sort of assessment. And so as you play the round, they'll get to see how you tackle say some indifferent lies and slopes and what have you. And as we approach the green, the quality of our wedge play, as we've talked about before, you could almost, at this point there's enough data out there to show that most players above a 30 handicap are hitting 0 to 2 greens around. And so players that are, say, a 30 to a 20 are not hitting much more than 4 greens around. So those types of players, as we know, are going to have their wedges in their hand a lot more often. So we want to, if we just tidy up wedge play and putting for that player, and probably in your playing assessment, the player will get to demonstrate that, to the teaching professional. So I think it's very important, the assessment. As you say, with the tour players, we can go into a lot more detail. And then from that point there, Stuart, we can create a very clear plan. And it's just like going to the doctor when we don't feel well. If we're very confident in the instructor, They're giving a nice sort of calm assessment, and then we're able to create a clear plan. That's very powerful, because now you're going to have confidence in terms of moving forward. I know for a lot of my players that maybe are in 4 seasons of weather there up in the Northeast or what have you in Canada, a lot of at-home drills. Maybe it's just checking to make sure your grip is in the right spot. You know, there's my glove. I want to get the heel pad on top of the cylinder. Maybe they've come from a palmy position, so I'm going to move this lower down in the fingers, and I'm just sitting down, and my grip's my number one fundamental. Maybe it was my biggest fault as a player. Maybe Sean sort of said, hey, you know, get rid of that slice, starts with getting the grip right. And so they can be sitting down like I am and actually just grip it 10 times and, you know, get the grip in the right spot. So there's many creative ways, but as I say, the assessment, getting a good plan going there, a plan that is accommodating to the student and their goals and their talent and your time to play. And that really is powerful, because now through our coaching platforms, whether it's Coach Now or V1, our students are able to send us videos and say, hey, how's it look now? And that's great. And it doesn't have to be 100% improvement. Maybe in year 1, the weak link that you've identified in your swing, maybe it's, hey, it's 30% better, 50%. I mean, that's huge. And so, yeah, assessing and creating clarity around a nice personalized plan, that's really key.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and something, you know, I echo as well. And just to break out slightly, I know there's a couple of questions come in, and we will get to some of the questions a little bit later. We'll talk a little bit about some of our thoughts, and then get to a few questions. So feel free to ask some questions along the way. There is a space on the screen there to ask some questions. There's also a couple of handouts to learn a little bit more about our video swing analysis and our education platforms for both golfers and for coaches as well. But I think, Sean, you're touching upon what you had. I certainly, as I've evolved in my coaching career, you know, I certainly like initially to spend time with somebody on the course. You know, that first meeting will be probably a couple of hours, and a couple of phone calls beforehand as well, to try and get as much background information, understand as much as you can about the student, what they really want to achieve, how much time they're going to invest, like we've said, and you know, what they're prepared to do to really get to where they want to be. A lot of people have the desire or the idea of saying, I'd love to be a 5 handicapper when they're 12, but do they really have the dedication and the willpower to do what's needed? And we all know that kind of some of the common pitfalls are that people practice, but they're not really getting a return on that practice. So I think what you talked about there was really, you know, essential, but it creates a lot of clarity, doesn't it? And I think both clarity for the coach and both clarity for the student. When you've done the assessment, you've got a plan, you can create a clear, big picture of what's going to happen or where you want to get to. And then it's working out the details of how you have that. And then, you know, how would you assess then the productivity of somebody's practice, the return on investment of time, if you like? You know, for you, how do you measure that with your students and, you know, ensure that they're keeping their confidence levels high?
Yeah, no, great point. So as we know, like, you know, let's just take a standard. Let's say we're fixing a technical issue for the player. They've come with a slice. It's a weak miss hit, sort of a classic issue for many players if they're listening, if you're a slicer. So let's say we identify a couple of fundamentals in the setup. As I said here, maybe the grip, a combination of getting the posture right, ball position. So those things are going to right away have an effect on improving, say, the ball strike, the start line, the curvature on the ball. And then we may create there, Stuart, a constraint for them to work in, perhaps something as simple as an alignment stick, where the club is traveling, say, more into out under the alignment stick as opposed to coming over the top of it. So what I'd like to see with most players is they have part of their training, as we would call it as coaches, would be, say, block training, where they might spend, if it's a quantifiable time or maybe amount of balls, but let's say, for instance, 10, 15 shots. After they do some warm-up, hit a few wedges to get some contact on the center of the face of the wedges, they can then go into, say, their block training. So they're going to, say, hit a designated amount of shots under the alignment stick. So all of a sudden they're creating a nice in-to-out swing path. They've got a stronger grip. The club face is closing more rapidly. They're turning a weak slice into a nice draw. So that would be stage one, to create some feels, change the pattern. And then what I'd like to see that same player do for the next third of their practice, and really most of it, is start to change up club. They might say do 3 swings with a 9-iron under that alignment stick. And then I might say, hey, let's take your 7-iron and hit 3 shots to 3 different targets. And I would repeat that sequence, and then maybe go from the 7-iron back to the drill for 3 shots, and then maybe back to a longer iron or hybrid. And then I come back to the drill. So they may end up hitting 15 shots on the drill, 15 shots out into the range at different targets. So 3 shots with 5 different clubs. And we may finish off between a couple of our posts with some drivers, and incorporating routine into that, because as we know from our training with our performance coach Ian Highfield, I mean, he's got some wonderful information out there. The golf course provides all of this natural spacing and variability, and we've got to introduce that onto the driving range. Lest we forget, yes, let's correct the mechanical aspect, but then let's not forget that when we go to the golf course, we're going to have space between shots, and we're going to have variability. So we want to introduce a little bit of that into the mix. So what I find is, for most recreational players, anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, that includes a warm-up, a little bit of block training, some variability in terms of both clubs and shot and targets, I should say. And then maybe a little bit of pressure practice at the end, where they might include, say, play the first hole, something that I know years ago when I watched Tiger at many events, I'd sometimes finish with my players, and then I go back to the bleachers because they weren't in the last group. So I get to go back to the bleachers and watch Tiger finish his warm-up. Yeah, what was phenomenal was I watched him, I don't know, probably a dozen times, and the last 3 shots he would hit on the range, or certainly last 2, would be his first 2 shots on the first hole. And he'd hit that drive, that opening drive, with his routine. You'd see he might take a little pause. In the old days, they might take a little puff of a cigarette. And then he'd hit maybe whatever club he felt, whatever shot shape into one. So when he walked to the first tee, he was in rhythm. So I guess to sort of summarize what we've just said in terms of the production around a productive practice would be, once you've identified and clarified what it is you need to work on, put that in a little block, compartmentalize it. Sometimes with drills and exercises, if it's quite difficult for the player, if they're maybe a little less skilled, as coaches, we have to maybe break that environment down a little bit and maybe slow it down. And that's okay. Maybe a grip change for some, as we know as coaches, is like, you know, it's it's like a facelift. You know, it's like completely, you know, doesn't allow you to see the game or the ball in front of you with the same feelings. And so, you know, we might soften this change by having you just make some little chip swings or little pitches. And so that might be part of your block training, just to chip and pitch, get familiar with the new grip, and then work your way into whatever other drill. And then let's get into different targets with different clubs, because as we've said, the golf course is random. It provides natural spacing and variability. And if we practice a little bit of that on the range, and maybe a little bit of Tigers, where the last 2 shots you hit are maybe the drive on one with good rhythm and balance, and the second shot with good rhythm and balance, you go to that first tee, hey, now your productive practice is going to transition.
Yeah, no, I think you made a great point. The one thing I would like to highlight, and I know I've had as an instructor or teacher, massive amount of success. We all know that a grip change, as you highlight, and getting the club to sit a little bit more where it should through the hand here, is really difficult for a lot of players. And it's a small change in terms of the positioning of the hands, but the feeling change is so intense. And I would recommend to anybody exactly what you said, and I've had much more success of this. if we feel that a grip change is necessary and you agree with your coach that, listen, this is the right direction to travel, this is from the assessment, needs to go in the plan, is do it through some short game, do it through some simple chips, through some little pitch shots, because the feeling change is still there, but the expectation of hitting a shot 175 yards to a target is not there. It's a little bit more manageable. And again, it comes back to the expectations. And I think what you've touched on there, the three key areas of the assessment, you know, assessing your game, knowing what type of player you are, knowing who you are as a player. I know we spoke about this before, is critical for the coach to help the student identify, and for the student to have enough self-awareness that they've identified, this is me as a player right now, this is where I want to be, and now I've got some clarity about what I need to do to get where I want to go. And then working with the coach, we can put a plan in place. And if there's a plan in place, for me, then you've got the ability to measure your progress, because you can, like you say, you can have those exercises, you can have challenges, you can have that variability and that spacing, and you creating your practice and your performance practice and your productive practice to echo and mirror very much what's going to happen on the golf course. And we all know that a lot of golfers say, how do I take this to the course? That's the old question, isn't it?
Absolutely.
How am I going to take this to the course? Well, a good coach will actually have you practice in a way that it is being taken to the course on the range. You know, you're doing the same type of things, and there's that natural progression. And I think what you've touched upon, those three there, and then the last thing, I think all of that leads to the player maintaining really good confidence and positivity, would you say?
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, you know, I think, look, if you look at the top players when they're playing their best, things are in balance. They have you bring a great attitude to the golf course. There's nothing wrong with hitting a few per shots. In fact, those really teach us more than maybe our best stuff, because if we can make, as you say, if you can make your bad shots a little better, and you understand what you're doing and have a plan to get there, you'll feel a lot more positive about it, and that's huge. I mean, I think as golfers, I feel very fortunate. All the way back to my junior days at Greystones Golf Club, we've had a great line of players in that club. Obviously, Paul Dunn is one of the club's representatives at the moment. He's done fantastic things, but I can say a bad thing about my involvement in this game. It's taught me so many lessons, and the pleasure of going on the course now that so many of my students are under restrictions with COVID-19, just the simple pleasure of going out into the fresh air with friends, having your little skins game or whatever it is you enjoy doing, and all the way up to the highest level. We have obviously our LPGA and PGA players right now, obviously, but it really has put in perspective that being out on the golf course is such a pleasure. And yeah, you definitely need to bring positivity to it. I mean, you could be in a lot worse places. I know sometimes players have shots on the course that they just, it's like walking into a death trap for them. But hey, that's what we're here. We're here to help them, and here to make sure that at least they have, a fallback, or if you will, a couple of constants to help them in those times when they get into difficult situations. But yeah, it's really key. Having positivity is definitely connected to having a good, clear plan. Those definitely sync up.
Yeah, one thing that always impresses me, I mean, I come out to Champions Gate a few times each year, and I've always had the pleasure to watch you and the guys on the team teach there that are highly experienced, and I obviously watch David in action as well. And the big thing that always strikes me is the individuality to every student. We all know that every human being is different. We communicate differently, or a good coach will communicate slightly differently to probably everybody, because they'll understand how to get the best out of them. But really the plan as well is that individuality of the planning and understanding what works for that student. And not everybody's trying to be a scratch player or a tour pro, and it's fine if somebody just wants to be a 12 handicapper and lose a little bit of the slice and get there. I mean, for you, in terms of dealing with high handicappers versus low handicappers and how you go about your assessment, Sean, what are some of the key areas that you look at in terms of maybe statistics, or maybe kind of the ownership and responsibility that you want the player to take, etc.?
Right. So let's just say we've obviously, been able to gather some information prior to the student coming, getting to know, how often they play, some of their strengths, weaknesses that they've identified, going out on the course, watching them play a little bit, gathering data through, obviously watching the player. I think as a good teacher, I think I've done a better job over the recent years of learning to shut up and listen, as opposed to telling them how much I knew. I quickly learned that in my first few years in Austria, when I realized these people can ski down, double black diamond slopes, but a golf course was something new. So I sort of had to do more demonstration. I'd play a few holes. So, establishing that assessment first, and then look, if we take the two extremes, we have the high level player here, perhaps an elite junior college player, all the way up to PGA Tour, and then we're here with a weekend player over here, not necessarily down there, because hey, they may be successful in it, but from a playing standpoint, I would say, for me, it's you're dealing generally with a higher handicap. We're less skilled, so we have to be careful that both the player understands, look, let's get after the low-hanging fruit here. If the person's a 90 shooter, I can right away identify that if I improve their wedge play and their putting, I can get them down to an 85. And I can also perhaps make that grip change in the process. And not really have to change much else. It might be something as simple as that. With the more skilled player, we may rely, say, if it's a tour player, on their shot link stance. We're going to have to go into a little bit more detail there, because if we move something, it may change the scoring average quite a bit. So I found with the top players, certainly looking at shots gained, that take, for instance, Frederick Jakobsen. If we got him in an event, it was a big key for me because he was such a good wedge player and putter. Our goal, tee to green, was to be 65% or more greens hit in regulation and our fairways. When we did that, he never finished outside the top 25. And every time he finished 70% on average for the week in fairways hit and greens hit, we never finished outside the top 5. So the numbers can be very helpful in terms of identifying, okay, let's get Freddie dialed in, hitting fairways. We didn't need to overextend his lower back issues. We just needed to hit fairways. After rollout, it was going to be comfortably somewhere in that 290 to 305 window, and then just take advantage of some iron play. With the lesser skilled player, we have to be careful that we're not trying to overachieve here. Let's move that first year's goal from 90 down to 85 or 84 just through the low-hanging fruit. So if I'm on the golf course and the weaknesses of that player are from 100 yards and in, that's going to be the focus point. We're going to have a goal this year. Maybe the player, it might be a female player, might say, hey, from 50 yards and in, that ball is going to be on the green. Whether you're 5 yards off or 50, parentheses, as close as possible to the hole. And so what you essentially, as we create the plans for the various players and individualize it, we've got to take into account, their skill set, their time available to play and practice, and be realistic. It's sort of like, going to the doctor when we're not feeling great. He's going to do that thorough assessment, say, this is where you're at. Let's get a little bit more rest. Let's get a bit more hydration. Let's take a yoga class or two, reduce the stress levels, and all of a sudden other things just sort of fall into place. And I'm amazed for the higher handicap. I can't tell you how many times I've helped players with their chipping, pitching, bit of sand play, tidy up their distance putting, get them good inside 5 feet. It's sort of that improvement manifests its way back to the tee. As you say, trying to create the play, it does vary from player to player. I mean, we could pigeonhole and say 100 shooters, typically this, they're going to hit 1 or 2 greens, they're going to have 40 plus putts, they're going to hit maybe 3 fairways, 4 fairways, etc. So we know, look, as a whole, we can improve every aspect, but we want to improve the aspects that have the biggest effect and allows that player to still be comfortable playing.
Yeah, no, great information. And I think that kind of brings us a little bit towards where we'll be able to answer a few questions. But, you know, what you touched upon there, I think is great. I mean, we've developed a new platform called the Ledbetter Golf University, so university.ledbetter.com. And over the past few weeks, we've actually populated a lot of free content on there. So talking about short game, there's one of our master instructors based out in Korea, Robin Symes, has brought together a short game course on there. There's a free sample, so really helping you how to adapt to different lies. Go and check that out. There's David's 7-minute practice plan from home, which is perfect to do at the moment. There's a little section around faults and fixes that deals with a lot of the typical faults that we tend to see as instructors and what David's felt relevant. That's free on there. And there's a bunch of paid courses as well where you can have a look at different areas of the game. But go check it out, try it out if you want. And for coaches, there's some more resources there. Sean, let's move into a couple of questions here.
Sure.
One from Anthony Gole. He says, what percentage of time should you spend between range practice sessions and course playing? And would you have any suggestions for on-course drills?
Yeah, no, great question. Look, again, it may vary depending on the player's ability and what they need to address, but I would, I'll scale it a little bit. Let's take our elite players. Generally, a general practice day for the elite players that I work with now, it may vary, but it would typically involve 3 hours of range training, of which 1 would be full swing dedicated, and 2 would be short game. They would follow that up with a little snack, and then we'd either have 9 or 18 holes programmed into their playing day, followed by maybe a half hour of putting on the back end if it were a lighter playing day, say they played 9. For a recreational player that has some time available, I would say 2 to 3 practice sessions, probably say if it were available, 2 to 3 practice sessions there a week. Could be, say if they have 60 minutes, and try and break it down into 2/3, 1/3. So 1/3 of the time, half hour to 20 minutes would go to full swing, and the other, say 30 to 40 minutes may go to short game. But again, that's dependent there, as we said, on what the focus point is of improvement. Yeah. And in other words, once we've done the assessment, that 2/3 may have that weaker area inside it. So we really get after it and turn it into a strength, where the other 20, 30 minutes may focus on the management. Yeah. As far as on-course training, it could vary. So if I've got a highly skilled player, what I'm going to do in preparation for a tournament is, to use an example, let's say I have a top-level amateur or perhaps a turf player, and we're prepping for a major, or the US amateur, US junior, or even with Lydia Ko when we trained for the last Olympics. I distinctly remember mapping out the Olympic course here at Champions Gate. I had the distances for all the par 3s, par 4s and par 5s. So in that regard, your on-course training should simulate those yardages, especially the wedges you're going into those par 5s with, to set up scoring opportunities, putting yourself into certain wind directions on the course that can maybe have given you trouble. So the on-course training, there's so many games you can play on the golf course. I know one of David's favorite games with Faldo, when he was feeling confident coming into majors, was 2-ball worst ball. And that is a very challenging game for a top player. And so they've got to hit 2 balls and play the worst one. So when you're up in the fairway, you've hit 1 down the center, 1 in the left rough. Well, you got to drop 2 in the left rough now and hit those from there. And so now maybe one is, say, front short 5 yards off and the other's 5 feet. Well, you got to go back to the one that's short of the green and chip that one up. And now one is 3 feet, one's 5 feet. Well, you got to make 2 5-feet footers to make a par. So that's an example of an on-course game that maybe an elite player may play. Very tough. Other games, if a player is lacking in scoring and maybe making a swing change, I'm going the other extreme, is I may have them play 7 to 9 clubs and play off the reds with no driver. Maybe their driver isn't their issue. They're just struggling hitting quality short irons and scoring opportunities. So I'm going to shorten the golf course It's a great game to play in the winter, as you know there, Stuart, back in Scotland and Ireland. I know we have the greens are mowed, a little holes put short of the green. We're up on mats, but it's a great way to get your scoring hat on. I asked Annika Sorenstrom many years ago when she was here, and she'd be practicing here as she had an affiliation with a course across the road, its design and her practice facility. But I said to her, what do you work on the course to help you with your scoring mindset? And she said, it's pretty simple. I play off the reds and try to break 30 on each 9. And I was like, okay, well, she said, it's really short. I've got a birdie putt on every hole. And she said, scoring for me is a mindset. It's about what does it feel like to be 6 under? She said, I don't care whether it's off the reds or off the blacks. She said, probably not going to happen off the blacks. But to me, that was very powerful, because I then realized as a player, yeah, scoring is a mindset. You've got to feel, hey, I'm 3 under. You know, I'm outside my comfort zone. How am I going to get to 4 under? Well, you've got to practice that. You've got to practice getting back into the present mindset, hitting that next shot with clear feel, clear plan. And so that's a great on-course game to help players with their scoring. Play a shorter course with less clubs. It'll help you set up more scoring opportunities, help you get comfortable shooting a lower score, and it'll just create that positive mindset.
Yeah, no, and I know we've talked a lot of there about, you know, putting an assessment, working out areas that you maybe can develop and can improve, but you've also got to identify what are your strengths, and your game plan to go play the course needs to focus on being planned around your strengths. So you play to your strengths and don't always focus on your weaknesses. And I think that's something that a lot of players, you know, forget sometimes. It's like, you know, what are you good at? And if you hit a fade off the tee or a little slice, well, unless you're going to really go and change it, embrace it, and, you know, work out how you're going to keep the ball in play. You know, if you're great with your wedges, you know, it might not be worthwhile trying to go for every par 5 in 2 laid up to a yardage that you like. You know, but again, it comes back to your assessment. Know what yardages you're good at, play to your strengths, and you'll enjoy it more. But I agree. We used to do this in when I worked out in Florida a lot with the juniors, was really shorten the course. And, you know, you've got a junior coming in saying, listen, I've shot 9 under today. And it's like, well, now they know what it's like to shoot 9 under. Yes, it's a shorter course, but they've experienced the emotions, the feelings.
Yes.
They've got the mindset of, right, I'm 6 under, how am I going to get to 7? And it's that kind of feeling is, are they sensitive to the reward of getting to 9 under or 10 under, or are they sensitive to the threat of, I hope I don't make a bogey on the next hole? Well, the course is short, it's presenting lots of opportunities. So a great way to develop that frame and that mindset and the internalization, I think. Another question, Sean, obviously with a lot of the countries in the world being on lockdown, not being able to get outside to the golf courses, somebody asked, can you do one-on-one lessons virtually through Skype, Zoom, etc. during this time? That was from Patrick Gons.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So I've whether it's other coaches, I've been conversing with other coaches this past week on video, and whether it's players that are sending in videos, absolutely. So to all our colleagues that are on the webinar at the moment, we say hi, and delighted you're able to connect. But yeah, we absolutely, I think the technology that we're currently using is allowing us to shrink the world in terms of connectivity. And, you know, you're in Scotland, I'm in sunny Florida, and a lot of our clients are here, there, and everywhere. But no, we're able to Skype and FaceTime depending on what platforms you're using. I actually like one thing that works well for us is when the student sends in through our Ledbetter University, university.ledbetter.com, and they register for an online analysis. I generally say, hey, you know, I give them my information. They can either text it or load it up on, say, a platform like V1 or whatever they're comfortable with, or email it. But if they put in a couple of points, it really helps. Like, hey, you know, these are my strengths. Here's a couple of areas I struggle with, my ball striking. And a Skype like this, the way we're connecting, allows me to even, you know, stand up and interact from a standpoint of, say, demonstrating a certain position. So the online lesson is very productive in terms of clarifying what the player should emphasize. Obviously, the analysis allows us to maybe present a drill or something an elite player is doing that they could maybe emulate. And that also is very helpful, because right away now you're creating a bit more clarity in that assessment. So yeah, very much so. I think we've been using connections face to face as well as just online through our V1 platform. So very productive with that.
No, absolutely. I think the context, players providing the context to the situation and what they do, giving you a little bit of an insight into the games, it's essential there. But yeah, guys, if you're interested in any online instruction, the team around the world and at Champions Gate, they're ready to help. University.ledbetter.com, you'll see, and I think a video online analysis is $25 at the moment, so check that out. Great question coming here from Matt Holder, Sean, and I'll throw it straight at you. Do you recommend tracking strokes gained as a way to honestly assess your game and focus your improvement plan? If so, are there any good apps or websites to enter, track, and review the data?
Great question. Yes, our wonderful sort of friend and expert in the data arena, Mark Sweeney, with Aimpoint, he's done an amazing job simplifying the strokes gained concept. And Mark, obviously renowned for his green reading and simplifying things with Aimpoint. I certainly have enjoyed using it, but his statistical program, GameForge, really takes a lot of information, and we've even had a teach-in here. You've probably seen it on the platform there.
Yeah, no, it's great,
Stuart. But what he does is, we've basically got, if I split the screen here with my golf club, we'll say this is even par, and in the various categories from driving distance, driving accuracy, approach play, wedge play, and then putting down here, we've got a couple of categories in each that are either moving left or to the right. And so, you start to see a snapshot in terms of where you're gaining and where you're losing. I think one of the things that was fascinating for us looking at Mark's example of that was he had a college player at South Carolina, and there's even par, and you could see all the areas she was gaining in positively, very little loss of shots in terms of her practice. But the problem was, when she went to tournaments, she was losing shots with her wedge play and her putting. And so that clarity to be able to take a decent player, or even a recreational player, and say, look, if you're going this side of the screen relative to even par, you're losing shots. Where are we losing the most? That's where we're going to focus. Is it a technical issue? Is it an equipment issue? Is it a strategy and attitude issue on the golf course? Are we trying to overachieve with our distance control? If we played in say Denver one time in our career and we hit a 7-iron 175 yards, that's not going to translate in October at St. Andrews. Okay, that same 7-iron might fly 130 yards, because the average 7-iron around the world goes 135 yards. So we have to be realistic with our distances. So to the gentleman's question, I think yes, strokes gained, very important. I think Mark made it very clear that total putts has the biggest influence. Naturally, if Rory goes out to shoot 65 today at Champions Gate here, he's probably going to have had plus or minus 24 to 26 putts. That's just the reality. That's the percentage it's going to fall in. If 100 plus shooter goes out, he's probably going to have 40 to 43 putts. That's the reality of it. So that's where we're going to see that strokes gained either helping the player or hurting the player. And I think it's having something as simple as, say, GameForge that Mark presents is an amazingly powerful tool for those players. And I'm not sure how, as most of us, we always want to find ways to get better quickly. So that's a quick way to sort out, what's going on in your game, where the biggest gains are going to be attributed to, and then get after that area.
Yeah, no, I agree. And when players keep data as well or track their stats, just make sure you're putting honest data in there. You've got to know if you're tracking what 15 feet or 5 feet or 50 feet is. You've got to know that's pretty much what it is. A lot of players don't have a clue what 25 feet is sometimes. So do a little bit of homework before you start tracking them. Sean, we'll take two more questions. and then we'll wrap things up and let you go. You're so gracious with your time here.
No, pleasure.
So a question from Paolo Pustetto. If you have a player with unconventional positions through their swing, would you try to change them, or would you be more inclined to create matchups?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think for me as a teacher over the years, I've learned that sometimes the best approach is actually in certain areas of their game. If it's their full swing, sometimes you'll screw up a player up a lot less if you don't touch anything at all. Again, going back to Paolo's question, it may be, say, I'm assuming the player has played for many years, developed idiosyncrasies in their swing, but if the matchup at impact is consistent, then yes, absolutely go after matchups. That is a great that's a great question. I've definitely had students where, aesthetically, maybe in my younger days as a teacher, I might have chased after the form of their swing, the aesthetics. And I know now as a teacher, one of the key areas for me when I look at, say, a full swing is, before I'm even saying anything to the client, I'll look at their impact conditions. How consistently can they repeat a good impact? I mean, what do we know about good impact? Well, if we're hitting an iron, we want the shaft leaning slightly forward. We want the club face square to our target, and we want the back of the left hand relatively flat. Okay, so flat left wrist, shaft leaning forward, and a square blade. So that's a good sort of visual, and observing the ball turf interaction, or maybe the turf ball interaction, depending on the type of player. But matchups are very important, because you're in the assessment, if you do a bit of a physical assessment, a bit of TPI or whatever it is you're doing to measure movement patterns and what have you, the ability for, you may not change very much. In fact, it may be something very subtle. It could be something in the equipment. So I think that's a great question, and Paolo. So I would be, at this point in my experience, I would be more looking at matchups rather than a preference change to get him to do something that I think he or she should do in their backswing. I'd be more geared toward taking what they own and what they're familiar with and making it work. If those matchups can be complementary, I think that's really key. And that's the mark of a really good teacher, is not to say wholesale everybody into one category. I think we have to be, as teachers, very mindful that a player, for a couple of decades maybe swinging a certain way and has the ability to put it back into impact consistently. And so it might be playing with them on the course. It might be an adjustment in some equipment. If they're a little older, getting them some lighter shafts, maybe some hybrids instead of long irons, etc. You can really work the equipment angle there, especially with some of the older players, getting them in some longer hybrids with a lower kick point. And so, I think that's a great point. So I would say matchups. I would definitely.
I would echo that, Sean. And looking at our instructor certification and training, the third level that we do is all about a little look back into memory lane of David's golf book, their Lessons of the Golfing Greats, and that looks a lot at matchups. What did Paul Azinger do? What did John Daly do? What are some of the things that they kind of matched up to make it work, if you like? And that's something that we're really key on, and David wants to impress on all of our instructors, is understanding the individuality of the player. We're not teaching them a method. Yes, we have a philosophy around kind of our instruction, but it's very adaptable, and it's really about catering to the individual. So yeah, I think matchups are a key. So last question, Sean. We know around the world, and I know certainly in Scotland, the average age of a golfer tends to be a little bit older across the world. So there's a question related to senior golfers from Nick Robson. What would your advice be for a competitive senior golfer, but they're physically unable to maybe hit as many balls as they once could, but they do want to practice?
If I'm not mistaken, that is the Nick Robson, the club tweaker extraordinaire. So Nick, if you're there, hi, it's Sean. Nick's I think near the Aberdeen area there. So great to have you on, Nick. And Nick can hit balls with the best of them. The problem is that lower back sometimes can take a beating. But if anything we've highlighted here, it's, hey, quality over quantity, Nick. So I think you may have been doing some stretching last time you were here. So if you are, for our senior golfers, the one thing Nick and I have talked about, and I definitely expound upon this with my senior players, is in watching the game since I've been involved with it there, Stuart, longevity in this game, especially from being able to hit the ball those distances that you've been decades prior, a lot of that has to do with mobility. Absolutely key. So I would say for senior golfers, and I'm the same way, I've got very tight hamstrings, you have to stay mobile. Vijay Singh, to me, having spent many years with our players on tour in his prime, the one thing that I took from it was, here's a guy almost up into his late 40s playing with these guys that are in their 20s, early 20s, early 30s. He lost no distance, and his flexibility and his range of motion to make that full coil maximize his club head speed. So I think for a player like Nick, for instance, I mean, he's so in tune with equipment, and I know we've talked about, say, maybe a slightly softer kick point, but if you can maintain your range of motion, very, very key to longevity for senior golfers. It's and then thinking of strategies within the swing. I mean, floating that left heel, a little bit of a Nicklaus float, where you let the left heel float in the backswing to create motion in the coil. And so I would say, great question. I think for the senior golfers, they have to take advantage of equipment in terms of the shafts in the clubs, the type of lofts they're carrying, hybrids, where do they cut off with the irons. They have to take advantage of doing some physical activities that encourage motion and stability. Mark McNulty, 45 wins in Europe and multiple wins as well as majors here, great friend of David's, told me about 15 years ago when he came over here to play on the seniors tour, he said, now more than ever, as a 50-year-old, I have to look after my health and my mobility and my efficiency of technique more than ever, because I don't compensate as well as I did in my 20s and 30s. So that to me spoke volumes. There's a player at 50, his back was a little beat up, he didn't hit it as far, and he wants to have a successful, at least, a good run at the senior tour. And he certainly did, winning, I think, maybe a major or two and some of the regular events. But we have to look after ourselves there, Nick. We have to say, keep the stretching going, get with a trainer. There's another assessment that you can get with. I know we all try to make a promise each year, every January, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to lose some weight and this, but hey, do it, as they say. So get after it and have a plan, have a bit of positivity about it, but definitely range of motion and flexibility, key to longevity for our senior golfers.
Yeah, Sean, perfect. That brings us pretty much to a close. I'd personally like to thank you for your time. It's always inspiring listening to you talk. There's always so many golden nuggets of advice from the 25 plus years that you've had working with LGA and 20 years at Champions Gate there. So, thank you very much.
Pleasure, Stuart. And that picture behind you is very inspiring to me, that picture of St. Andrews.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that 25 minutes is the old course and all of the links that from the house. And I was saying on one of the Instagram lives we did this week, it drives my wife nuts that every time we drive into the town, there's a little car park just next to the Jigger Inn. And I insist that we park there and we walk through the wooden gate and walk up the road past 17 and 18 and into the town. So no, I'm pretty fortunate to live where I live. Yeah, so it never grows old. It's just standing there thinking about the moments and the memories that have been created at St Andrews and the Open Championships and various events. But yeah, if you can't get inspired stood looking at that, then I'm probably not in the right job. But, Sean, thank you very much.
Great stuff.
For all the viewers and listeners, David did a great session with Gary Player on Sunday, what would have been Masters Sunday afternoon. That's actually on our YouTube channel. So It was a fantastic 1-hour chat between the two of you, and you talk about staying healthy into our age there. Gary had some great words about health and fitness, as he would. So check that out. It's there to view on the YouTube channel. Tomorrow on our Instagram channels, we will have some more Ledbetter Kids, our grassroots junior program. I'll be talking with Gavin Grenville-Wood, who's head of our junior education and Ledbetter Kids program. So if you're interested in that, tune in. And Friday, we'll be back on the webinar with another one of our master certified instructors, Matt Denzer, a good friend of yours, Sean, who will be talking a lot about kind of Paolo's question about the individuality and the adaptability of both players and coaches. So again, that'll be another really interesting conversation with Matt.
No, fantastic, Stuart. Really enjoyed it, and I appreciate anybody who chimed in. Hopefully there was a nugget or two in there, but be well, be healthy, be smart, and we'll get through this, and we'll get out on the golf course, and hey, might even get over to St. Andrews.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Guys, just a parting note, there are 2 handouts on the webinar. Feel free to download them. If you want to check out university.ledbetter.com, there's information on there about educational courses for golfers, for parents, and for coaches. And if you're a coach and you're interested in learning more about our certification program, that is really more of a mentorship and involves conversations like we've just had here, quite in depth. And that's on there. You feel free to connect with me or Sean, and we can hopefully give you a little bit more information. But as Sean said, stay healthy, stay safe, and hopefully we'll have you viewing on Friday. Thanks, Sean.
All right, great stuff. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.